to trust what my ultimate authority says.
Okay.
So if I say, well, here's this Muslim God, I believe in Yahweh, the God of the Bible, but I'm just going to put him on the shelf for a second and ignore what he said about Islam and about other gods. And I'm going to just inspect Islam for myself and try to come to a conclusion about Islam to see if it's true by looking at the facts. But as soon as I do that and I don't trust in Yahweh anymore, I can't be justified in believing that I exist as a human, or that you exist, or that other people exist. Like, maybe it's some kind of weird matrix reality. It could be just like there's just all these different options it could be, and because I have a finite mind, if I stick with what my finite mind says, I'm stuck. I can't get anywhere, and I can't figure out if Allah is the true God. So I have to believe in Yahweh at all times, and if I give him up, now I'm reduced to absurdity. Does that make any sense? Everything does rely on faith. Like, we use faith all the time for everything. If I'm talking to a Muslim, I would point out to them...
No, it doesn't make any sense. You're saying that Yahweh, because you specifically believe in Yahweh, like, you can't ever, like, even when, like, looking at different religious perspectives,
Yeah.
you can't, like, turn off. I don't know exactly how to say this.
Like, put him on the shelf and say, I'm not believing what he said about other gods right now. Because God says no other gods exist.
Place of neutrality.
Or God says that Allah doesn't exist, right? Neutrality doesn't exist.
Neutrality doesn't exist.
So I can't, as soon as I try to take on neutrality, I'm committing epistemological suicide. I'm embracing absurdity. I'm saying anything's possible. I don't know. Blah, 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 blah. My words mean nothing. I don't know what's true. I can't have knowledge. So I don't want to embrace that reality. I don't want to live like that. I want to be consistent. And so when I say words and say, I know this, or this is true, I want to have justification for what I say and what I believe.
But what you want isn't exactly necessarily where the foundation of truth will come from. Like, that can't be like where you base truth.
True. But the alternative, we have to think about the alternative to that is, well, it's not necessarily about what I want. It's about when I say things like I know this, I would basically be lying, and I care about truth. So I mean, maybe we could call it a moral thing. Like, if you care about truth, you're going to want to be consistent in your epistemology. If you don't care about truth and you want to be an absurd person, you could do that. You could be like, I don't know anything, but even as you say that, you're kind of contradicting yourself, because that seems to be a knowledge claim. But maybe you say, well, no, it's not a knowledge claim. It's not knowledge. The claim that I don't know anything is not a knowledge claim. Maybe they could say that. It's all just a bunch of jumbled mess. And if we have to think about, there's two different things I could put faith in. I could put faith in the jumbled mess, because everything relies on faith, or I could put faith in an orderly universe created by God that bears truth. And I could believe in concepts such as goodness and righteousness, and lying is bad. And so, like, what am I going to put faith in? I have two choices. I'm going to put faith in all-knowing being instead of finite consciousness that could be wrong about everything it thinks is true. Two different options. I'm putting faith in the better option.
All right.
The only option that makes any sense. Yeah. And if I'm talking to a Muslim, I'll tell them, like, how their worldview contradicts itself to help them see, like, this is bogus. Because if people can see that, like, what they're trusting in is not a great method of justifying beliefs, then you can help them move into Christianity.
I disagree. Like, it still makes a level of don't. You're saying from your perspective, you can't know anything unless God exists.
Unless I have revelation from the omniscient being God.
Okay,
So
but a Muslim who has revelation from the divine, they're wrong.
right, because they don't have revelation from the all-knowing being.
See, but in their minds, they do.
Right,
So,
but they would be wrong. So it doesn't matter that they think, because they're finite creatures, right? So
Yeah.
what they think doesn't really matter if they could always be wrong.
Yeah, but they're making the point here is that they're using the same logic and the same reasoning as you. So when
So you're
I
saying, how do I?
When I consider it from their perspective,
Yes.
like you're being a complete hypocrite.
I'm not being a hypocrite. I'm being consistent. If my ultimate authority, if I'm saying, in order to justify beliefs, I have to trust in revelation from omniscience, and then the revelation from omniscience tells me that I'm trusting in, tells me that they're wrong. I can't say, well, now I'm going to ignore what the revelation from omniscience said, and now I'm going to go with what my own mind. But as soon as I go with my own mind, I can't justify the belief that Muslims exist, because I can't justify the belief that humans exist.
Can't justify the belief that humans exist.
Right, so if I stop believing what God reveals in order to try to figure out if Islam is true, I can't justify the belief that Muslims exist as human beings.
You can't justify the belief that Muslims exist as human beings.
Right, because they could be figments of my imagination in some kind of alternate universe that I don't understand correctly. If I'm trusting in finite consciousness, then how do I know it's true? Because there could always be something about reality that I'm not aware of that could invalidate everything I think I know.
Okay.
Like
what
the
if
Matrix.
The all-knowing being is just a figment of your imagination, entirely created by your own ideas and personal stories. Like, how do you know that is?
Because if that was true, I couldn't know anything. And I believe I'm putting faith in the belief that knowledge exists. I'm choosing to believe that knowledge exists. If I choose to believe that knowledge doesn't exist, I'm choosing to be an absurd person. I'm choosing the absurdity and the foolishness.
Yeah,
and
absurdism. You would be choosing.
Maybe that's what it's called. I don't know. But
interesting. Okay, so you're choosing to believe that knowledge exists, as therefore you are just, it's based entirely upon faith.
right, everything is based on faith. Because so the definition of knowledge, that's been used in philosophy, a common definition, is justified true belief. Belief is required for knowledge. Belief and faith are very closely, basically the same thing. When you believe something, you have faith in it. When you have faith in something, you believe it. If you believe that the Chiefs are going to win the next Super Bowl, you have faith in the Chiefs. So knowledge requires faith. So if we're using faith at all times, then we shouldn't have a problem with acting on faith. Like, I have had to use faith this entire conversation with you, believing that you're not a figment of my imagination and that you're a consciousness that understands what I'm saying and that you will respond to what I'm saying. I've been believing that, putting faith in that this entire time. If I don't have revelation from God that He created human beings, I have no justification for the belief that you are a human being. Maybe I've been talking to myself this whole time. How do I know I haven't been talking to myself this whole time? Because you exist different. You're a different entity than I am. Because God created different entities, and He told us that He did. The all-knowing being revealed to us the true nature of reality. In the Bible, and through the innate knowledge that He created us with. Everybody knows that God exists, but people don't want to acknowledge His existence. And so they put faith in other things. They put faith in themselves. They put faith in their limited consciousness that for all they know is deceiving them. Yeah.
Yeah? How does that work? What's
Well, murder is the unjustified killing of a human being. And God says, you shall not murder. He says he hates the hands that shed innocent blood in Proverbs. So shedding innocent blood, it's murder. I think we can all agree on that. God says he hates it in Proverbs. So I'm advocating against it. I'm fighting against it. The Bible says, love your neighbor as yourself. The people living in your area are your neighbors. These children live near me. They are being targeted for mass murder, so it's my job to be a voice for them because they can't be a voice for themselves. Their rights have been stripped from them, so I have to speak up for their rights and say, they're created in the image of God too. These people are just as valuable as anybody else. Everybody has to live in the first stages of life. Everybody has to live inside the body of their mom. Nobody has a right to murder another human being simply because they're growing and developing in the first months of life, and the mom doesn't want to be pregnant. Do you believe abortion's murder?
Well, I always thought of it more like, I thought of this, like, let's say it's 10% chance it's killing a baby. You want to take that chance? That's where I kind of stand with it.
What do you mean by that?
Like, in, like, the probability of, like, when people talk a lot of the time about consciousness and, like, when is the baby conscious and is it alive, right, that reality. And I kind of think that, like, let's look at it from a just fundamental reality of probability. Like, we don't know for sure if it is or is not killing a baby. Like, and if you accept that, and you accept that there's just a relative probability, which a lot of people would, like, I would say, let's say that it's 10% chance you're killing a baby. Are you taking that chance?
Why would it? Okay. Why would there be any doubt as to whether or not it's a baby? Isn't a baby just a young human being?
Yeah.
A really young human being, the first stages of life.
Yeah.
So I think it's safe to say that these are babies. And I mean, if you want to call a fetus, I mean, that's okay. You might as well call it a baby. You also have like little embryonic people, and if you don't want to call them a baby, you can just call them an embryonic person. But it's the same human being from conception until what you and I are right now. The same entity is growing, same biological entity is growing, present the entire time. It doesn't change into a new entity or a new species. Two human beings, when they have sex, they create another human being. They don't create a different type of being. So the embryo is the product of reproduction of two human beings, therefore it's a human being. It's a he or she.
It's a he or she.
Yep, they have their DNA that will determine what they look like when they grow up.
I mean,
they've got their genetic material that determines their gender.
But are those things what constitute being alive?
Well, alive requires a soul. The book of James says that the body without the...
I don't believe in a soul, though. Like, because you have to, like, get people to agree who don't believe in a soul as well, right? So...
Sure. But ultimately, you have to go to God's word. Because if you're not appealing to what God says, it's just a battle of, like, opinions, arbitrary opinions of what constitutes life. If somebody's, it's just an arbitrary construct by society if we don't have revelation from God to tell us what life is, what's alive. If someone says, well, I don't think an embryo is alive for such and such reason, that would just be their arbitrary opinion. But I think everybody can agree that if something is growing, it's alive. An embryo is a person who's growing. It's a human being who's growing. So it would be kind of absurd to say the embryo is dead. So if things are either dead or alive and it's growing, you should probably call it alive and not dead. There's nothing that's dead that's growing.
There's nothing that's dead that's growing.
So it's the embryo is always growing. Or you can freeze embryos and they won't grow in that state. But if you unfreeze them and thaw them out and then put them in a woman's uterus, they will start growing. Yeah. And of course, they can't live by themselves. They can't keep on growing if you take them out of the environment. But if you took you or I out of this environment, we couldn't continue to survive either. So everybody needs a certain environment in which to live. If someone launched us into space, we wouldn't stop being human beings. We would be human beings who just were removed from the place that we need to live in the stage of life that we're in.
Be convinced, but
so what creates the doubt in your mind about these being like fully alive and human beings that deserve equal protection?
It's a fundamental question of consciousness, and if they're like, if that makes any sense, like and if that makes
So you're wondering if they're conscious?
Yeah, if they are like, I'm thinking in my head, what is it exactly that makes a life a life? Is it the fact that it's growing? Is it the fact that it has a body? Is it the fact that it has a mind? Like you say that it has a soul, but not everyone believes in a soul. But those people simultaneously have a, I guess, yeah.
Those people
absurdly arbitrary and varying.
I think everybody would agree that something that's growing is alive, right?
Something that's growing is alive.
Yeah. So we don't even have to talk about consciousness. I think everybody can agree that anything that's growing is alive. And what is growing? It's not a raccoon. It's not an elephant. It's not a lizard. It's the product of two human beings reproducing through sex, which creates what? Another human being.
I just want to